Hi everyone, my name is Scott and welcome to another episode of What I've Been Watching. I apologize for not having a video out last week. Life gets in the way sometimes. So this episode we will talk about what I watched a week ago, and then another video will come out on Friday where I'll talk about this last weekend. So let's get started. Back in Time is a documentary film which talks about the genesis of and the fandom surrounding Back to the Future. And it's okay. The first third of the movie talks about the backstory of Back to the Future. They talk to Bob Gale, they talk to Robert Zemeckis, Steven Spielberg, the people behind the scenes and how they created the concept for the movie and then created the movie. And all that stuff is not anything that's new, but it's all stuff that is rarely put together in the same place. And I found all that interesting. But the second and third act is where the film kind of lost me. This documentary is very much in love with the fan base of Back to the Future. And that's fine, that can be interesting, but they tell too many similar stories for it to keep my attention. They profile 3 or 4 couples who have created their own DeLorean time machines. I would have been fine with 1 or 2. The one group is interesting because the one group made their own DeLorean time machine and ended up helping Universal Studios rehab the original A car from the film. And that's your main story. That is super interesting. So those other stories kind of drag that section down, and they talk to a band who does Back to the Future themed parties, and they talk to a couple who got married at a convention. It just gets very far into the fandom, and I didn't have much invested in that. In that, I like Back to the Future, but I don't know these people well enough to really invest the amount of time that was needed for those stories to be worthwhile. If I was in the fandom, if I was one of the big fans and everyone knew each other, that would be different. But as just a fan of the movie, that part didn't hold my interest. This is a fan-made movie that was made for the fans that they knew, the people that surrounded them. And I'm sure for those people it's great, but it kind of lost me. I would have been super happy with just a half hour of Michael J. Fox telling stories. There's some of that in here, but not enough for me. Ed Wood stars Johnny Depp as the infamous, terrible movie maker Ed Wood in a film directed by Tim Burton. And I have seen this movie a lot in the past. And I realized after I bought the Blu-ray of it that I don't think I've ever seen the movie in its original aspect ratio. I've only seen it on VHS in 4:3. I keep motioning to this side as if there was still a graphic over there. This thing in 4:3. My cat is slightly off camera licking his crotch. Don't you like Ed Wood? Finch? Finch. Just going to town. Cool. Anywho, I really like this film. It seems like Tim Burton has a kind of kinship with Ed Wood, kind of the outsider, the odd duck, if you will. And he feels kind of a kinship to who Ed Wood was. And this movie lays all that out, the outsider who was surrounded by outsiders. But this movie's great. What stuck out to me this time, and like I've said, I've seen this thing a ton of times. It's probably my most viewed Tim Burton film. What stuck out to me was how well the movie flows from scene to scene. And the performances. The performances in this thing are universally great. Standouts are Bill Murray, hilarious in the film. Also, Martin Landau, who won an Oscar for his performance in this film, is amazing. And there's a lot of his performance that got lost on the wings of a 4:3 picture. And that was almost like watching a completely new performance. But yeah, one of my favorite Tim Burton films, if not my favorite Tim Burton film. Where to Invade Next is a Michael Moore film where he goes to other countries and tries to take their best bits, their best ideas, and bring them back to the United States. In this film, he's invading ideas. This movie is a good encapsulation of everything Michael Moore has been doing for the past 2 decades. There are elements in his past films that are in this film. Sicko, Capitalism, a Love Story, even parts of Bowling for Columbine. And he works with the premise that America does not have the corner on good ideas. And some of the great ideas that are in other countries were originally American ideas that we've strayed from. And he kind of goes from there. This is a long film. It feels long. It's very episodic in places because he is going to different countries and it has a lot of moving parts because of that. But I think it's one of Moore's best films. At the very least, his most cohesive film in a long time. It does get a little long in the tooth, but it is one of his best films. The Lobster is directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, a name I'm surely mispronouncing, and stars Colin Farrell and Rachel Weisz. The premise is Colin Farrell's character goes to a resort, I guess, full of people who are single, that if you don't find a match within a certain amount of time, you will turn into an animal of your choosing. He chooses a lobster. Hence the title. Probably my least favorite of Yorgos' movies. I didn't actively hate the film, but I also didn't like it. The premise was a little too simple for me, and there was no mystery for me as to where it was going. After a while, I was like, I get it already. I know what you're going for. Just get to the end. And it's a very long film for it to be hitting the same note over and over. Of the 3 movies of his that I have seen so far, it is my least favorite. Killing of a Sacred Deer is probably my favorite movie of his. The Favorite is probably a more commercial-friendly film, but that would be my second favorite. This would be in last place. Alps, I think, is the movie he directed, and it is coming up very fast on the wish list, so I'll have thoughts on that here in a couple weeks. But this one, just wasn't into it, guys. Fantasy Island is a 2020 Blumhouse horror movie directed by Jeff Wadlow and stars Michael Pena, Maggie Q, and Lucy Hale. And it is probably the worst Blumhouse movie I've seen. And it's the first one they put their name over title on, which is strange. Imagine a movie that is made up of 5 of the worst horror scripts you can find and slam them together in ways that don't complement each other and in some respects completely contradict each other and keep moving the goalpost as to what is actually happening, and you have Fantasy Island. This movie is scare-free, poorly acted, horribly written, competently shot at times. But when you're on an island with a beach, it's hard to shoot bad video. And it does the sin of all sins. Sets up a cinematic universe that you hope never happens. It's also pointless and bad. And did anyone want this IP? For those of you who don't know, this is based on a TV show that's long since been forgotten. Was anyone clamoring for a Fantasy Island movie? Especially one that's horror themed. Like, this thing doesn't make sense. Yeah, it's all so bad and an incredible waste of time. What have you guys been watching? Anything cool? See you in comments. Thanks for watching.